With the deepening of economic exchanges in the world, people in every country are affected by transnational trade and international travel to varying degrees. If a successful international businessman or a mature diplomat wants to do his job well, he must first understand the economy, culture, and living habits of the target country. Today, I will introduce the history of China from the Chinese people's eating habits. In China and throughout East Asia, rice has been an important source of heat for local residents from ancient times to modern times, and ensuring high rice yields has always been the most important thing for this ancient Oriental country to do. China now has a population of 1.4 billion, and its main breadbaskets are on both sides of the Yellow River and along the Yangtze River in what is now China. In order to ensure the food supply of the huge population, the Chinese people have always paid great attention to the production of rice and other crops since ancient times. A firm grasp of the grain area is an important basis for the ancient Chinese emperors to maintain a huge empire. Until the 8th century, China's population lived in the Yellow River Basin and parts of the Yangtze River Basin, when the population remained stable at about 60 million people. As the population continued to rise, China inevitably fell into the Malthusian population trap around the middle of the 8th century under the powerful Tang dynasty. At that time, most of China's arable land was concentrated in Shaanxi, Henan, Hebei, and other regions, and the grain harvested each year was far from enough for the huge population to eat. Moreover, in order to satisfy the luxury life of themselves and the upper aristocracy, the rulers of the Tang dynasty also continuously transported grain and goods from the grain-producing area to their ruling center, Chang'an, through the Grand Canal. The grain-producing region of that time was north of the Yellow River in China, and according to historical records, people in the north of the Yellow River paid 10 times more taxes than Chang'an. As the people could not bear the high taxes on rice and other crops of the Tang Empire, a rebellion soon broke out against Chang'an, the capital of the Tang Empire. Only 3 months after the rebellion began, the capital of the Tang dynasty, then one of the most powerful empires in the world, fell to the rebels. The rebellion, brought about by hunger, lasted for 8 years, during which tens of millions of people died, and the powerful Tang dynasty began the countdown to its demise. The people of the northern Yellow River region of China were largely freed from the direct rule of the Tang dynasty after this rebellion. After the people were given freedom of food control, the area north of the Yellow River soon surpassed the imperial capital area to become the most populous and prosperous area of China at that time. Although the Tang Emperor still nominally ruled the northern region of the Yellow River, the tax collectors sent by the emperor could no longer collect rice and other grains as taxes for the Tang Empire, and the emperor's tax collectors could not even guarantee their own safety. Since the rebellion against the Tang Empire lasted for 8 years, small-scale upheavals and wars had been happening intermittently, and the metal monetary system had to rely on a stable social environment to play its role. So the Chinese people had become accustomed to using rice and other grains or salt as money to buy daily necessities, rather than gold or other metals. Imperial tax collectors also tended to collect grain rather than gold and silver, because in ancient China, only grain could ultimately win the war. Around the 13th century, Genghis Khan unified the Mongolian steppes, at which point his ambition was to conquer the known human world. Central Asia, Europe, and the northern Yellow River region of China were all part of Genghis Khan's conquest plan. The northern part of the Yellow River in China was closest to the range of Genghis Khan's attacks, and the conquest of this land would have provided him with strong material and financial support for his attacks on Central Asia and Europe, while the overlord of the northern part of the Yellow River in China was already the Jin dynasty. Legend has it that before Genghis Khan was born, the ruler of the Jin dynasty had Genghis Khan's grandfather nailed to death on a donkey made of wood. Strong personal animosity and the importance of conquering the Jin dynasty to the Mongol Empire's plans for world conquest, Genghis Khan did not hesitate to launch an all-out attack on the Jin dynasty. In addition to the fighting on the battlefield and the terrible Mongol slaughter, Genghis Khan also launched an even more terrible food war. In order to eliminate the war potential of the Jin dynasty, Genghis Khan's army destroyed farmland north of the Yellow River in China and converted it into horse farms. Unable to collect enough grain to feed the army, Zhengdu, the capital of the Jin dynasty north of the Yellow River in China, was quickly captured by the Mongols. After the capture of Zhengdu, Genghis Khan, in revenge for the murder of his grandfather, carried out a mass massacre of the inhabitants of Zhongdu, leaving behind only the craftsmen who could make siege equipment, which would later play a huge role in the conquest of Central Asia and Europe. The massacre of Zhongdu city and the famine caused by the destruction of farmland caused an estimated 1.5 million deaths, and the Jin dynasty was forced to abandon Hebei and began to shift the center of its rule to southern China. The slaughter of the cities may be over in a short time, but the famine caused by the destruction of farmland has long afflicted the people living north of the Yellow River in China. Mongol conquests brought not only destruction but also plague, and the Black Death, which once ravaged Europe, was also active in the lands north of the Yellow River in China. The northern Yellow River region, once the richest in China, is on the brink of total collapse under the twin ravages of hunger and plague. But as terrible as hunger and plague were the Mongols' tax collectors. For example, if the Mongolian ruler needed 100 pounds of rice, the taxman would collect 500 pounds of rice from the people in his tax district, and the remaining 400 pounds would go to the taxman's own pocket. Of course, this predatory tax system eventually provoked a revolt. In the eyes of the Chinese, they could endure hard labor and subservience to their rulers, but the loss of their farmland and the resulting hunger were intolerable. The man who led the downfall of Mongol rule in China was a beggar whose name was Zhu Yuanzhang, who nearly starved to death because he had lost his farmland. He was not only a homeless man who was nearly killed by hunger, but also the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty, who built the most powerful Eastern empire in the human world by relying on a broken bowl in his hand to beg for food. The early experiences of the legendary emperor undoubtedly reflect the miserable lives of most Chinese under Mongol rule. Zhu Yuanzhang's parents and all his brothers and sisters died in the famines and wars that ensued under Mongol rule, and if the emperor had not joined the resistance, he would soon have been reduced to ashes, starving and cold. The emperor joined the resistance in China's Huihe River basin, which straddled northern and southern China, right at the border between old and new grain-growing areas. As a result of the destructive Mongol rule in northern China, the economic center of China had shifted substantially to southern China, which gradually accounted for about 80% of China's population at the time. The emperor's rebel army, because of its location on the border between north and south, knew its Mongol opponents and was able to operate in the new breadbaskets. And gradually this rebel army came to control the main breadbaskets of China. The policy of Mongol rule was to maintain a strong military presence in northern China to force southern China to send grain and other goods to northern China by canal and sea to maintain a luxurious life in the north. Instead, Zhu Yuanzhang emerged as the leader of the rebel army in a brutal battle and largely took control of southern China as the Mongols fought for power in the north. After effectively taking control of the main grain-producing areas of China and gaining a strong logistical capacity for his army, Zhu immediately cut off the food supply to the Mongols and sent his battle-hardened army to launch a deadly attack on the Mongol Empire. In less than a year, the Mongols, who had ruled China for about 100 years, were driven back to the Mongolian steppes, which caused a chain reaction that also led to the collapse of Mongol rule in other regions. And the peoples of the countries that had been ruled by the Mongols ushered in freedom. Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang founded a new empire, the Ming Empire, after unifying China. In order to maintain his empire for a long time, Zhu Yuanzhang converted Mongolian horse farms into farmland and relocated large numbers of people to northern China to restore productivity in the northern Yellow River region of China. During this period, China's population and food production were greatly increased. And according to Western missionaries in the 17th century, the population of the Ming Empire was close to 200 million. Interestingly, however, the Ming Empire, in its quest to rule the country, tried to issue paper money to solve new economic problems, but it caused more serious inflation, and crops such as rice played its monetary properties, and people continued to trade food as money, due to the irreplaceable currency properties of rice and other crops in ancient China. The imperial royal family, bureaucrats, landlords, merchants and farmers have been fighting for the ownership of farmland within the empire for more than 200 years. In the 17th century, farmers were the final losers in the struggle over ownership of their farmland, and most of them lost their farmland. Unable to survive, the peasants had to organize one rebel army after another throughout the Ming Empire. trying to recapture the land by military means. Although the peasant resistance army was ineffective, countless landless peasants continued to organize armies to attack the Ming Empire, and eventually the capital of the Ming Empire was captured by a rebel army composed of hungry peasants. The Qing Empire took advantage of this chaos to wipe out all the peasant armies that resisted the Ming Empire, and dominated China instead of the Ming Empire. Well, today's content is here first. Like video, friends can leave a message below the video. You can also like the video. Pay attention to our